Here.
Councilman Jonathan Heisey.
Present.
Councilman Rob Jones.
Here.
Councilman Ron Cardwell.
Here.
Councilman Matthew Myers.
Here.
Mayor Kurt Mayo.
Here. Going to recess the council meeting and go to the planning commission for roll call.
Chairman Patrick Scott,
Here.
Commissioner Jennifer Ochoa,
Here.
Commissioner James Fickus,
Here.
Commissioner Brock Garrison,
Here.
Commissioner Asa Worley.
Here. Board of Adjustments.
And now for the Board of Adjustment, Chairman Bill Long,
Here.
Board Member Gary Layton,
Here.
Board Member Britt Stanley,
Here.
Board Member Don Woodard.
Here. Parks and Recs.
Board Member Asa Worley.
Here.
Board Member Clay Schubert. Board Member J.J. Smith. We do not have a quorum for Park and Recs.
Noted. Piedmont Library.
Chairman Alan Watson,
Here.
Board Member Nidra Funk, Board Member Glennis Peterman,
Here.
Board Member Rebecca Anderson.
Here.
That should be all of our boards. So I'd like to reconvene to the council meeting. Just stand with me for the flag, for the allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You'd stay standing. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight, Lord, as a town, as a city, and we just pray that you would watch over us, Lord. Guide us and direct us, and thank you for all the blessings that you give us. In your name I pray. Amen. So we're going to hold item 4 until after the scheduled business. Item A, number 5, scheduled business. Item A, workshop on parliamentary procedure, meeting conduct, and council, commissions, boards, and staff responsibilities thereto.
I'd like to introduce the speaker today. We have CJ Caven with us today. He's got a presentation. He is well known for parliamentary procedure. He actually gives trainings across the country. He also serves as parliamentarian for the House of Representatives and has done that for a number of years. And if you've ever been to the House chambers, you'll see him whispering the parliamentary rules into the speaker's ear, and does a great job. So he's going to lead our presentation today. We'll turn the floor over to Mr. Caven.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you this evening. First of all, let me just apologize. I normally, when I do presentations, I wear a suit and a tie and boots and long socks, but it's 110 degrees outside today. So I decided to get rid of some of those layers. But I am excited to be here with you. I've known your city attorney for a long time, and he was asking, is this something that you'd be willing to come and do? And I love doing stuff like this. I served on the school board for a number of years. This isn't part of my normal bio that I give. I served on the school board for a number of years here in Oklahoma, and the challenges of public meetings and meetings of quorum, I certainly understand that, and so I'm excited to be here and sharing with you today. So, as Daniel said, my name is CJ Caven. I'm the Chief Parliamentarian and Deputy General Counsel for the Oklahoma House of Representatives. When we're not in session, which is the best part of everybody's year, I spend a lot of time traveling across Oklahoma and traveling across the country working with organizations, tribal governments, anything you can imagine, doing just this, doing this presentation for anybody that needs help. And the groups that need this presentation the most are dog clubs and condo associations. So anything that you think, it's the dog clubs and condo associations. The only time I've ever had anybody arrested at a meeting was at a dog club meeting. So I'd be happy to talk about that afterwards if you'd like. So, and I'll share this with Daniel as well. But you know, a little bit about me. I'm one of 6 attorneys in the whole country that is credentialed as much as I am in this topic. All that means is I have spent so much time in Robert's Rules of Order that it is unhealthy, and it's probably not great for my relationships. But this is what I do. There's not that many of us that do this specific work, and I'm just so blessed to have grown up here in Oklahoma. I served on a school board in Luther, and we live in Guthrie now. So my law office is actually about 10 minutes from here. So this is what I do. I'm the vice president for the National Association of Parliamentarians, and the past parliamentarian for that group. If you think there's a worse job than being the parliamentarian for parliamentarians, that's the worst job I've ever had, as well as being at the legislature. So, quick disclaimer: I'm an attorney. I'm not your attorney. You know, I'm going to talk about meeting rules, governance, parliamentary procedure, but none of my advice is legal advice. You got a city attorney. He gives you legal advice. He advises on the applicability of law. I'm going to talk about some things generally, but none of this is legal advice. And then anytime, this is really important, we'll talk about this again, anytime that you read something in Robert's Rules, or maybe more importantly, somebody stands up with a copy of Robert's Rules and says, well, it's in Robert's that we can't do this, it may be in there. But that doesn't mean, at least in your case, that's what's going to cover. Your city charter, any ordinances you've passed, but also state law. I mean, anytime that state law is going to conflict with any of those things, Roberts isn't going to apply. And so it's just really important that just because the book says it, doesn't mean you have to do it or you can do it. So yeah, just a quick disclaimer on that. And then, you know, what I want to talk about, what sort of as I prepared for the next little bit of time with y'all, why rules matter. I get asked a lot, you know, why should we care about meeting governance, Robert's Rules? You know, why do rules matter? So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the purpose, the principles. You're not going to hear me talk a lot about tonight the characteristics of every motion, because you know y'all have meetings to do after this, and if I have to wake you back up, you're probably not gonna like that. We're going to talk about big picture principles. Why do these rules exist? Why does it matter that we follow these and we treat people the same way? How business is conducted in meetings, and then how good governance protects your organization, protects your reputation. We're going to talk about that. The way that I like to present, you know, I've got plenty of content to cover all of the time, but I also want to answer, you know, any questions that y'all may have as well. So if you have a question, if I'm talking about something, you want an example, just interrupt me. You know, just raise your hand, interrupt me, ask your question. I'd rather you ask it and get an answer when we're on topic than waiting. And then as we get closer to the end, you know, if I need to move through things a little bit faster, you know, I can manage the time that way. So just interrupt me, and that would be great. So let's talk about why rules matter. So I think there are some pretty big principles that relate to why rules matter. But I'm curious, and you know, you don't have to respond if you don't want to, and that's okay. But anybody have a thought of why you think rules matter? Meeting rules, anyway. Why do we think rules matter?
Consistency.
Consistency, absolutely. Why is consistency important?
It's your basic standard.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's the basic standard. Consistency sets an expectation. And setting that expectation and being consistent is how people get treated fairly. I think so often in meetings, and I remember both as a school board member and as somebody on the opposite side of those tables sometime, just feeling sometimes like, you know, my voice isn't being heard. And I think so often in meetings, the frustration is my voice wasn't heard. Maybe, you know, whatever we were dealing with, you know, my voice, you know, just, I didn't get to share my opinion. And I think it's really important that we keep in mind that our voice getting heard isn't the same thing as us getting our way. right? Eventually, we gotta take a vote on something, and I'm okay losing a vote if I feel like I had the opportunity to persuade, like I had the opportunity to give my opinion, to share my insight. Rules are important because it helps us sort of determine where everybody's at. It helps us expedite business. It helps us ensure justice, provide equal treatment for all members, and help an organization accomplish the purpose for which it was formed. For lots of organizations, whether that's local government or nonprofit or state government or for-profit, lots of times meetings get down rabbit holes that really don't have anything to do with why we exist, right? The whole purpose of a meeting is for people to come together who have the authority to make decisions on behalf of others and have a conversation called the deliberative assembly. It's to have a conversation in an orderly way. So making sure we're treating people the same and doing the work that we should be doing, that only we can do, that we can uniquely do. What are rules for? Well, as I said, expedite business, getting through the agenda, maintain order, one thing at a time. And when we do the one thing at a time, only one person speaks at a time. Ensuring fairness, equal treatment for every member. Everyone gets treated the same, and helping the board accomplish its purpose. Part of that, part of sort of this fundamental aspect of parliamentary law are the rights of these 5 buckets. The majority, the minority, particularly if it's greater than 1/3, individual members, absentees, and all of these together. So what I tell everybody when I give this presentation, whether you just want to have a meeting where you don't leave 3 hours after you're supposed to, or you're interested in becoming a credentialed parliamentarian, which just telling you that's not the career, that's not the life choice you want to make. Whatever interests you, everything fundamentally I think you need to know about parliamentary procedure I think comes from this slide. Every rule in Robert's rules, everything in meeting governance comes out of a right that we're protecting. So whenever you hear like, well, that takes a 2/3 vote, there's only a handful of things that take a 2/3 vote, and every single one of them take away the rights of membership in some way. So when we talk about limiting debate, that takes a 2/3 vote. Every time, unless you've got an ordinance or something else that says otherwise, it takes a 2/3 vote. The reason why is because we're limiting debate. So every rule in Robert's rules, every rule in parliamentary procedure is based off of one of these buckets. Nearly everything can be done by a majority. The majority who comes together, who decides, who makes decisions, who takes votes, nearly everything can be done by a majority. But there are some things that can't be. You can't take away membership rights. You can't violate the rights of the individual member. For example, you can't let somebody who has a right to vote or has a right to speak, you can't take that away from that individual. Absentees, if somebody's not at a meeting, you can't do things at some meetings without people being there. Y'all are in a little bit more unique situation because of the Open Meetings Act. You gotta tell people in advance what you're gonna do. And then all of these together, this is a balance. You gotta balance all of these rights as you're moving throughout your meetings and throughout your organization. I would say for public bodies, there's an additional right that isn't normal, and it's the right of the public. You gotta balance that right of the public and those who are making the decisions on their behalf. There's a trust there, there's a relationship there, so you gotta balance that right too. And the way that we balance that in Oklahoma is obviously the Open Meetings Act and the Open Records Act. So I think there are 10 basic principles of meetings, and then I've got a bonus principle. The first 10 are in Roberts, and the bonus principle is basically what they all mean to me. So the first one is the rights of an organization's total membership are paramount. The rights of an organization's total membership are paramount. And what that means is a majority makes decisions. Decisions made by the organization's assembly or board or group, that decision maker, supersede those of any individual or small group of individuals. The power of any meeting is in the hands of the voting member. What that means to me is, I often disagree. People often do things that I don't agree with. And if I show up to the meeting and I make my arguments and I plead my case, and I lose the vote anyway, I've still got an obligation to support that group. Just because I lose the vote doesn't mean I lose the right or the privilege or the obligation to support the overall mission. Because I'm sure there's times where you've won votes and other people have lost. You've been on the other side, and you still expect those council members, those board members, whoever that might be, to still support the overall decision. And I know in whether that's in local government or particularly in state government, where I spend most of my time, there's always people who don't like a specific decision that was made, and that's okay. That's healthy. It's how we handle that that makes a difference. But it doesn't mean that the decision's not legitimate. It doesn't mean that the decision was made, it has any less power or force just because I don't like it, or just because a group of people doesn't like it. If it got the minimum number of people necessary to be adopted, it is binding. All members have equal rights. Now, when I use the term members, I just want to be very, very clear. When I use the term members, I am talking about the members of that board, that group, that council, that commission. And there is a delicate balance with public meetings, because the public also has a right to attend. In some cases, there's a right of participation, but there's no right to speak in debate, make motions, or vote. Like, there's very clearly a separation of what the public's right is and what the council's right is, or what the committee's right is. And that's very important. And just because, we've got some rights doesn't mean we have all rights. So when I use the term members, I mean the members that generally have the right to vote. Because if you have the right to vote, you have the right to do any of these. You have the right for any of these. Voting, speaking in debate, making motions, you have the right for any of those. So when I use the term members, that's what I mean, generally the voting members. All members have equal rights. I am aware that there is, I think in your charter, that there is a limitation on the mayor's right to vote. To break a tie. To break a tie. So that's the only limitation, or a limitation. And that's an example of where your governing documents are going to supersede those provisions of Roberts. Just because Robert says that, you get to make your own decisions as well. So, but generally, all members have equal rights. Speaking in debate, making motions, and voting. Those are the big ones. You got to have a quorum. This is a basic principle. You got to have the minimum number of people legally required to conduct business. And I think, although I didn't hear all of it, I think even when you were doing roll call, somebody made a comment about the quorum of whichever group did the roll call. That is super important, because nothing undermines, one, the legitimacy of any work that you may or may not have done, but also that perception of any work that you may or may not have done. You got to have a quorum, the minimum number of people to conduct business. And this is based off of how many people are we as a community or we as a group willing to let make these particular decisions on our behalf. What's the minimum number of people that we think are required to make those types of decisions? So that's really important. Only one main proposition may be before the assembly at a time, and only one member may have the floor at any one time. It's one of my favorite rules. Every time I give this particular talk with this particular slide, I always think of movies that give people talking sticks, right? Like, you can't speak unless you've got the talking stick. This is that principle. You can't speak unless you've been recognized. In order to be recognized, you have to have the ability to be recognized, meaning you're a member, you have that right. No one else has preference in recognition. Whatever you're seeking recognition on is appropriate at this specific point in time. But when we talk about when we do business, we talk about one thing at a time. When we talk about that one thing, only one person speaks at a time.
Yeah, if we can unpack that a little bit, kind of two-part question. On propositions and then obtaining the floor, if you could walk us through how you obtain the floor. I think sometimes we have times where we all kind of get input, and maybe we can work that a little bit better. And then the second part of that question is, a lot of times, just like in the House, we'll have an ordinance up for debate, but then we want to maybe amend it. So can you talk to us about how those propositions work when we're layering and then obtaining the floor?
Yeah, I'll come back. I've got a whole section on conducting business, so we'll talk about that motion flow here in a little bit. But as far as recognition goes, I mean, it's part of that workflow as well that we'll look at. But the big thing is, I mean, unless you've got established debate rules, your default is Roberts. And, you know, the default of Roberts, you just say Roberts was written in 1876. It sounds like it was written in 1876. Lots of the rules indicate that it was written in 1876. The default debate rules in Roberts is 10 minutes per person, per debatable motion. Twice. Right? That's a long time. And my recommendation is always to limit that. Like, and that's debate between the members. Like, I mean, that's debate of the members debating a motion that's currently pending. If a motion isn't pending, those debate limits don't apply. So there's some limitations there. But it's really important, and we'll talk about, you know, once a motion is made, once discussion happens, how you go about doing that. But it is really important that the chair recognizes people. You know, we'll talk about the chair's duty here in a little bit, but the big thing, the chair recognizes people to speak based off of, and it's not based off of, according to Robert, it's not based off of some list. The only thing that they have to be cognizant of is who gets preference and recognition, and that's generally the maker of the motion gets preference and recognition. So if you made the motion, you get to speak first. After the motion's been made, after it's been seconded, after it's been stated by the chair, you get to speak first. Outside of that, unless it's a point of order or something else interrupting, you get recognized in the order that the chair saw somebody seek recognition after the previous speaker stopped talking. I mean, and that's the rule. If you want to make adjustments to that, you certainly can, but that's how it's supposed to be handled. And it's not in order to speak when somebody else is talking, unless the chair has to interrupt for some reason. There's limitations on that, but I mean, the chair does have the ability to interrupt debate for specific reasons, but nobody else does, unless it's a point of order, unless it's, you know, there's a violation of the rules. But then you deal with that violation and you go back to the person who is speaking. So yeah, we'll talk more about that as well. So we talk about when we in meetings, when we talk about something, we talk about one thing at a time, and only one person speaks about it at a time. And the way that I like to sort of visualize this is every time in a road trip with my children are 7 and 9, right? Every time we're in the car, all 4 of us are in the car, and they're talking about like where we're gonna stop for lunch. And I'm driving, and what I'm focused on is moving this car forward and not going into the bridge or the river or whatever. It's moving this car forward. And then at some point, they're like, well, what do you think? Meaning me, which they never like what I think. We can only stop at Chipotle so many times before they're like, we want to try something else. But at some point, like, everyone else has to stop talking so that I can not only focus on driving that car, running that meeting, but also hear what the discussion is. Also hear what the ideas are. And then we'll go around the car like what everybody wants, and then we'll take a vote basically. And my 7-year-old son wins every time. I don't know why we take a vote. We just always do. We just always do what he wants to do. But that's what I think about. Like, you have to focus. And none of us are good multitaskers, right? None of us are good multitaskers. We have to focus. And so that's what this says. When we're in a meeting, we're focused on what's the agenda item and who's got the floor. And whoever's got the floor, their job is to try to convince us this is either a good idea or a bad idea, and why. We'll talk more about that. Number 5, full debate before action on a main proposition is a right that can only be suspended by a 2/3 vote. Again, I said there's only a couple things that take a 2/3 vote. Moving previous question, calling the question, cutting off debate takes a 2/3 vote. Any member can make that motion. If you've been talking about something for 2 hours, and you know, like, everyone sort of knows where they're at, but we're just sort of talking, and I'm not really talking about local government, I work at the state. You know, I mean, we'll spend hours and hours and hours on one topic, on one bill. Anybody can move the previous question. Anybody can say, I move the previous question, or I call the question. Gotta be any member, and you just take a vote. Motion, second, it's not debatable. Really important principle, we don't debate. things that deal with debate aren't debatable. Call the question, I move previous question, if there's a second, you just take a vote on it. All those in favor of closing debate, raise your hand. Put them down. All those against, raise your hand, put them down. If you got 2/3, you move on. You know, you go right to the vote. That's a really great way to respect everybody's time. Respect everybody's time, not let people filibuster, you know, familiar with that. The other thing I would say is, you know, if we're gonna follow strict Robert's rules, you only get to speak twice on a motion. So if you've spoken twice on a motion, I mean, I don't know about your lawyer, I know I went to law school because I'm bad at math, right? Like that's just I'm just bad at math. But if you got a 5-member board and you got a motion that you've been on for 3 hours, well, that doesn't math right. Even if 5 members times 10 is 50 minutes, times 2, if everybody spoke the maximum amount of time, that's what, 100 minutes? A little under 2 hours? We spent 4 hours on it? Like, well, we've already violated our rules. Like, I already know that we violated our rules because we're over time. So those are the types of things I think are helpful when controlling the agenda, when controlling time, because you've got other things as well.
You do 2/3 count based off those present or the total number of seats?
Based off those president voting. That's what Robert says. And that's a great, we'll get to voting in just a minute, but it's 2/3 based off those president voting. So if you abstain, you know, that doesn't matter. Number 6, a proposition or issue or motion is the item under discussion, never the person who introduced it. Personal remarks are always out of order. So this is so fundamental. We treat, you know, we have to have decorum in meetings, and decorum is that wonderful 1876 word for, we just gotta treat people with respect. That's all this says. We just gotta treat people with respect. And just like I said a few minutes ago, when we're debating a motion, all we're talking about is this motion a good idea or not? We're not talking about the person who introduced it. We're not talking about, you know, maybe the community members that are here to speak to it. Like, all we're talking about is this a good idea or is this a bad idea? And your remarks, your debate, your discussion should all be about that. And it is the chair's responsibility that when it gets personal, to have you stop talking. The moment it goes from, you know, doing this is a good idea to this person is a bad person, or we're only doing this because this person's, you know, whatever, or has this motive or whatever, that's never okay. Questioning people's motives is never okay. Because guess what? I've got friends that I agree with 99% of the time. And I may love them, and they may be great people, but they're not right 100% of the time. And on the flip side of that, I've got people that, you know, I just don't care for. And I'm sure you've got people that you just don't care for. I don't want to list, don't tell me their names, but I'm sure they exist, right? Sometimes people that we don't like have good ideas. Sometimes. Right? That happens. But if we're so focused on the personal relationship that we can't ever get past that personal engagement, we're never really getting to the merits of the motion. And I get to see this a lot in the legislature where people, you know, either cross party lines, we have bipartisan bills, or, you know, urban members and rural members are working together. That's generally the greatest divide in the legislature is urban and rural, coming together on issues that they might not always agree on, but they agree on this issue. And this issue moves the needle. This issue is good for the community. This issue is good for whatever we're doing. And that's why it's really important that the debate be limited to just the merits of the question. And it's also really important that this be strictly enforced every time. And one of the hard things about being a presiding officer is strictly enforcing it every single time. Strictly enforcing it the first time it happens. You know, and just interrupting. And unfortunately, that's a personal remark. Remember, we got to keep our comments on, is this a good idea or a bad idea, on the merits of the motion. We don't talk about people. We talk about ideas. And the moment we start talking about people, it is the chair's job to cut them off and say, just a reminder, We don't talk about people, we talk about ideas, we give you, one more chance, and if you keep doing that, we're gonna move on to the next person. That's what Robert says to do. Like, that's the rule. So that's really important. And the moment we cross that line, the first time we crossed that line, well, now the only thing I heard was that you don't like me, right? And it's hard to move on from that. So Roberts is pretty intense about managing the debate. And Roberts is a meeting management tool. I think the rules of decorum and respect apply regardless of whether there's a motion pending. Like, I mean, whether that's, in reports or public comment or announcements, like, I think rules of decorum always apply. Number 7 is my favorite rule for government. Once a question once decided, or a question or a motion or a resolution or ordinance once decided may not be presented in the same form in the same session. This is to avoid wasting time. If we've talked about it and we've debated it and we have voted on it, we're not coming back to it. We're not going to come back to it unless there's a really good reason, and then there's a procedure for that. I mean, you can reconsider, you can rescind, you can do different things. But when you're talking about the next motion, the next thing on the agenda, we're not talking about the things we already did. And it is the job of the chair or anybody else that's a voting member of the assembly to say, point of order, that's not germane, that's not related, that's not connected to what we're talking about right now, and move on. And we'll talk about what you do if you disagree with that. You think it is related, we'll talk about that towards the end. Number 8, a majority vote, there's an exception here. A majority vote decides a question, except in cases involving the basic rights of members or a change in previous action, then a larger vote is required. Under Roberts, a majority vote is defined as more than half of the votes cast by persons entitled to vote, not counting blanks or abstentions. So I want to be super clear. That is true in every instance except government. For something to pass a 5-person city council, it takes 3 votes every time, right? Not 2. You can have all 5 people there. If only 2 people voted, it doesn't pass. It takes a majority of the board, right? Right, Daniel? I mean, for local government, it always takes, or for state government, to pass something in the House of Representatives, it always takes 51 votes when we're talking about a motion to do something, that main motion to do something. It always takes 51 votes or a majority of the entire membership. That's a distinction. And I just want to be super clear and draw that distinction. If you go back and look at this, they're like, oh no, we got 2 votes and that was more than anybody, like, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter here, it matters everywhere else. So, number 9, talk about this, a 2/3 vote is necessary for any motion that deprives a member of his or her rights in any way. That includes changing or cutting off debate, closing nominations or the polls, or rescinding action without notice. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about rescinding action without notice, because in order to do that, you'd have to put it on your agenda first. We don't have to worry about that with us, but for any of the other procedural things that don't have a sort of a substantive impact, it takes a 2/3 vote. Number 10, silence in the context of meetings gives approval. Those who do not vote when the vote is taken allow the decision to be made by those who do. So if you don't participate, if you're a member and you don't vote, that's your right. We can't force you to vote. If you don't want to vote on something, you don't have to. But then don't complain about it later. No, I'm kidding. That's not the presentation. But if you're letting the people who are choosing to vote and willing to put their name out there, because your names go in the minutes, it's all a public vote. It's all a roll call vote, basically. If you're not going to engage, if you're going to abstain or not show up, you're letting the decision be made by those who are willing to show up and engage and participate. So, with the exception of the chair, who obviously cannot in some cases. What do all these rules mean? What do all these rules mean? What do all these principles mean? Everyone is entitled to an efficient meeting. Everyone is entitled to an efficient meeting. Now, I want to be clear. This does not say that everyone is entitled to a fast meeting, right? You can take a really, really long time in a meeting and still be efficient if you've done a lot of stuff. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. back one on when somebody abstains from voting. I was under the impression that was a no vote.
Yeah, for the cities, it's required to vote as count as a no. His principle remains that you had a chance to engage and you didn't. We'll record it as an abstention, counts as a no. Yeah, he's just saying you need to participate essentially.
So that's exactly right. The reason it essentially counts as a no vote is because you have to have a majority of the entire membership. By not abstain, because you have to meet, I'm gonna use 5 as an example because it's easy math for me. If you got a 5-member board, you must get 3 every time. So any person that is not a yes is effectively a no. I mean, however you record that, but if you're not getting 3 yes votes, it's not passing, right? So that's why it's considered, that's why it matters, but it only matters when you need a majority of the entire membership for something to pass. But for example, and that's on like an agenda item, right? But if I've got a motion to close debate, and I don't vote, and I abstain from that, that's not a no vote. Like, that's an abstention, and the abstention doesn't count. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Great question, great clarification. Every member is entitled to an efficient meeting. Doesn't have to be fast. What I consider an efficient meeting is, did we get the things that we had to do on this agenda done and we treated people with respect, and we had robust debate. People felt like they had the opportunity to be heard, they had their rights protected, and we eventually took a vote, right? And as long as you do that repeatedly on every agenda item, I think that's an efficient meeting. Now, if we've got, hours and hours of debate or filibustering or delay or whatever, that's probably hard to call that efficient, right? And maybe you've not walked out of this room or whatever room thinking like, man, that was efficient. But that's probably not the words that you use, right? But that's the principle. And if we adhere to these principles that I've gone through, we're much more likely to have an efficient meeting, even if it's not a fast meeting, right? The other thing that is not on one of these slides, but I do think it's important as part of this efficient meeting concept is, sometimes we put a lot of things on the agenda because we think it sounds nice, right? We pack agendas sometimes, and this is true everywhere, not just true in local governments. We put a lot of stuff on the agenda. In the back of our minds, some of us know, like, we're never gonna get to half of that, right? You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer, that's okay. Psychologically, when you've only got through half your agenda and you walk out of this room because you've been here for 4 hours and you finally adjourn, having not done it all, did it have to be done at this meeting? Well, clearly not, because we didn't. But it has, in my opinion, a demoralizing effect of, well, now I don't feel like that was efficient because we got half the agenda, we left with half the agenda. If you know something's gonna be controversial, and you know you're gonna need to take a lot of time doing something, I would always look at the agenda and say, what can wait? What can we do that, push to the next meeting? That way we don't feel like we're behind, that we're not getting all of our stuff done. Because from a voter's perspective, from a constituent perspective, when I don't pay attention to my city council, I'm so bad. But when I see like they've done stuff, or they adjourned after 4 hours and only did 2 things on the agenda, like even me, I'm like, well, that's not very. Like they didn't get anything done. Like I didn't even go. Like I have no idea what they did. But it just sort of feels that way. It feels like we're portraying to ourselves and to our constituents and to our voters and to whoever else, we're not effective. Like that's the feeling people get. Well, that doesn't mean we're not effective. Those things clearly didn't need to get done. So if we know something's going to be controversial, sometimes it's okay to wait and push stuff to the next meeting, knowing like, hey, we know we're going to spend some time talking about this item. So, not on the slides, but I think it's important. So let's talk about the presiding officer. Whether you're, a mayor or a committee chair or the vice chair who, has to run a meeting because, the mayor decided one day he's like, I'm not going to that meeting, or was busy or whatever else. Presides over the meeting and keeps order. That's their job. They've got a responsibility to enforce your rules. More so than anybody else in the room, it is the chair's responsibility to enforce your rules. Generally, only votes to break a tie. I know your charter says that, that's what Robert says too. The chair generally only votes when it would affect the outcome. That's what Robert says. The chair votes when it would affect the outcome. Why is that important? So the chair is neutral. So the chair is impartial. So that the chair isn't indicating one way or another. If I know I'm not voting on this, and I don't get to vote on this, except in unique circumstances, you know, in theory, and in most of the time in practice, I'm running that meeting a little bit more impartial, because I can't give, you know, a vote in the outcome, at least for the member. So, stays neutral in the chair. Most of the time, I like to describe as the mayor as a referee and not a player. And for any of you that would just watch any of the World Cup recently, and I hope you at least watch one match, they are just as engaged in those games, they're just as involved, they're just as knowledgeable about what's going on, but it's their job to watch the plays and react. It's their job to hear the debate and react, to see who wants to get recognized and react. And then recognizes speakers, states questions, and announces the results. I think the most important job of any presiding officer, other than enforcing the rules, is to ensure that every voting member, and in theory every person observing, knows what they're about to debate and knows what they're about to vote on. I think the primary job of any presiding officer is to ensure clarity. Do people know what they're doing? Do people know what they're debating? Do people know what they're voting on? Because I've walked out of meetings sometimes where I've been a member, and I walked out thinking, you know, my vote meant this, and the person I was talking to after the meeting said, well, my vote meant that. And those were not the same thing. Because we were confused about what we were doing. Number one job, ensure clarity and enforce the rules. The board acts as a body. No single member, no single official decides alone, particularly in your form of government, particularly in your community. Nobody has any more authority than anybody else. The board acts by a majority vote in a public meeting. Authority comes from the vote, not from the volume. Just want to say that one more time, in case you didn't hear me, which is pun intended there. Authority comes from the vote, not from the volume. So I work in a room with 101 microphones. To be fair, they only work when I turn them on, so it's a little bit different. There's a lot of loud voices in our society, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, where we move and how we decide things comes from those who have the authority to make those decisions and how they vote. Not how loud or boisterous or anything else that you might describe the meeting, not how loud the meeting got. It's decided by the vote. And then once the board decides that, the decision is the board's position. And you can like it or not like it. I mean, that's sort of how democracy works, right? You know, you get to exercise your voice and who you elect. They exercise their voice and their authority based off of the authority that they have, which either comes from the legislature or from their charter. It's a delegation of authority. So once they decide, that's their position. So let's talk about, let's transition to processing business, which is my favorite part of this. I love the principles, but this is my favorite part. Because I like to talk about what all this means. How do we actually accomplish all these things in a meeting? And first, I think it's important to define what we're talking about. Meetings are gatherings of people that are coming together to make decisions. That's what a meeting is intended to be. Sometimes you need some information, sometimes it's just informational. But by and large, the meeting is the time for people to come together and make a decision. And we do that in an orderly fashion. So the term motion is how all business is introduced in an assembly. The term motion means the formal proposal that a certain action be taken. I have a different definition for what a motion is. This is how I define motions, resolutions, ordinances, pieces of legislation, you know, House Bill 1, 2, 3, 4. I define them all a little bit differently. I think every single one of them is somebody's proposed solution to a perceived problem. Every motion, every request for decision, or whatever you call it, is somebody's proposed solution to a perceived problem. And the reason I define it this way, other than clearly that's what it is, I'm about to explain why, is because when you come to a meeting with an agenda item, whether it's your agenda item or somebody's come to you with it, they've identified a problem that only you can fix in this meeting, that only you can fix in this moment. We've identified a problem, right? And this is our proposed solution to that problem. So let's just briefly unpack this. So if you agree that there's a problem, most of the time you can find some compromise on what the solution is. If you agree there's a problem. But a lot of times, we don't agree that there's a problem. We don't agree that there's a problem to solve. And when you don't agree there's a problem to solve, it's pretty impossible to come up with a solution, right? So let me give you an example from my day job. And I'm not asking for any of your opinions on this because, I'm glad to be here, but I don't care, right? So let's look at, I used this example earlier with a bunch of high school students that were visiting the Capitol. So the legislature last year passed a bill that bans cell phones in schools, right? This is a much different crowd than the group that I talked to about this morning, who was very not thrilled about this example. We identified a problem the legislature identified a problem of literacy scores are going down, test scores are going down, cyberbullying, right? Those are the problems we're trying to solve. And we think one of the solutions to that is no phones from bell to bell. Like, those aren't my words. You go back and listen to the House floor. That's the conversation. Read those problems. This is our proposed solution. It's a pretty easy example of, yeah, we agree. We could probably all agree that this is a problem, but do we agree that this is the right solution? This might be a solution. There might be more things to do to solve this problem, but this is a solution that, maybe we can find some common ground. There are other issues like, guns and taxes and abortion that, again, I don't care your opinion, which one? That when we see those types of bills, there's going to be people who just think these bills don't solve the problem, right? And that's okay. But the point is, when you don't agree that you're solving a problem, it's really, really hard to come together and compromise on a solution. So I think half the battle in your meetings, when you're processing business, is proving, one, this is a problem that's worth solving, and two, this is the right solution to solve this problem. We often jump into, this is the solution, this is what we've got to do, let's move forward with this solution, without taking the time to truly explain, here's the problems we're trying to solve, and that's why this solution is the right solution. And that's what the debate should be. When you're debating motions, it should be exclusively, do we agree that there's a problem? And if we do agree that there's a problem, is this the right solution? So that's my definition for what you're doing every day in every one of your meetings, is discussing proposed solutions to perceived problems. A main motion, meaning any of your agenda items for the most part, can only come when no other motion is pending. It requires a second. It ranks the lowest of all other motions, and it yields to everything else. So if you've got a motion to provide a budget increase to this department, another motion about to change the asphalt company you're using, not in order. You got to deal with what you're dealing with first. You got to dispose of the main motion before you move to another topic. It goes back to that principle, when we're talking about one thing at a time, we only talk about that one thing at a time until we've taken that vote, until we've disposed of it. So that's what a main motion is. When a main motion is pending, subsidiary, privileged, and applicable incidental motions may be made. We're not going to go into any of that list because, again, we've got other work to do tonight. But that's sort of the hierarchy. Everything happens by a motion. A main motion is that proposed solution to perceived problem. No motion, no decision, and that means it's just a conversation. And let me just say this, if it's just a conversation, it doesn't belong in your meeting. Because the point of the meeting is not to come together and just chat. The point of the meeting is to come together and make decisions based off of problems or motions that we have before us. If we don't have a motion, it's just a conversation. So I just want to include this. I'm going to send these slides, so you'll get all these as well. This is just the ranking motions. All I want you to think when you see something like this is when somebody makes a motion, or you got a main motion pending, this is the list of things that are in order, and when they're in order. So a motion to adjourn is always in order. Always. A motion to recess is nearly always in order, unless a motion to adjourn has been made before that. Right? That's all this means. Where people get tripped up is the couple at the bottom. Amend, refer, postpone, that's where people get tripped up. But this is the order that you've got to take motions in because that's what Robert says. We could go into why, but it's really not important. It's just what Robert says to do. So let's talk about this. This is my favorite slide in the whole presentation because this is the process that you should be using every time. Every time you've got an agenda item, this should be the process. Somebody makes a motion, somebody seconds it, it's stated by the chair, and then you have debate. So often, and whether that's in local government, or any other type of organization that uses Roberts, we normally start at the fourth step. We normally start with the discussion. The problem with starting with discussion is we don't really know what we're talking about. Just because I get recognized and say, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for recognizing me, and I go off on some tangent about the park, I'm just making stuff up. Like, if that's a real issue, I'm so sorry, but and I just start going off on some tangent about the park, what point is that? What's the purpose of that debate? Does it help us make a decision? And if I'm just talking, the answer is no. It doesn't help us make a decision because I've not proposed an action. And so then the next person speaks about, well, last time we were at the park, we also noticed this issue and blah, blah, blah. Well, we're still not talking about an action. And then, another speaker gets recognized and says, well, in addition to the park, I also noticed this issue down by the baseball field. Well, now we're way off topic. Now we're not talking about doing anything. What we're having is what I like to call, very offensively, group therapy. Right? And in group therapy like this, we're really not coming together to solve the needs of our friends and neighbors, right? We're just talking about problems. But we're not talking about our solutions. Because those solutions come in the form of emotion. So what should happen at every meeting, for every agenda item, for every group, for all, whether that's for anything in Piedmont or anywhere else, it should be this exact process every single time. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the fiscal year 27 annual budget. Second. It's moved and seconded that we adopt the FY 27 fiscal year annual budget. Is there any debate? And the person who made the motion under Roberts gets preference and recognition. Why is that? It's because this is the first time that they've had the opportunity to tell us why this is their right solution for the problem that we have. Yes, sir.
Well, what if something's being presented to you that you don't really know anything about? How can you make a motion to approve or not approve something you don't even know what it is?
So there's a couple of things. Asking questions, like if somebody's giving a report, asking questions is totally okay. Asking questions is totally appropriate. As you're clarifying what is the problem and what is the right solution. And you can ask, Mr. City Attorney, Mr. City Manager, whoever, like, what's the motion that we need to do here? You can ask those types of things and get counsel, but until you start with that motion, you shouldn't be group talking about what that problem is. You can ask questions. You can engage with the person giving the report and make a motion from that engagement, but it's not a group conversation amongst each other until somebody makes that motion. You might have questions for the city manager's report, and you might want to make a motion based off of that. And you ask your questions, he gives you the answers, you're thinking of what you might want to do, and the next guy or gal, has questions about the report as well. Well, until somebody makes a motion, we're just talking about this report. We're getting clarification about this report. Not every report needs a motion. Sometimes you need answers. Maybe getting those answers informs a motion that you want to make either at this meeting or at the next meeting. But that's the guardrails. Making that motion is going to provide the guardrails for what we want to do. And the thing that we're gonna get to here in a minute is, it's really not productive, even though we're used to it and we think it's productive, it's really not productive to have the discussion to formulate that motion. Because, one, there's no guardrails. You know, we can talk about anything we want to, there's no sort of structure here. But the person who makes the motion, like, it's supposed to be their proposed solution to the problem. So whatever you think solves this problem best, make that motion. And the rest of the members are gonna have the opportunity to change that if they want to.
So if I ask for an item to be placed on the agenda, when they come to that item, as soon as we get there, I should make a motion to approve that item, and then hopefully someone seconds it, then we have to debate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because here's the other part of that. If nobody seconds it, we're not gonna spend time on it. The whole point of this second is that more than one person wants to talk about it, right? Well, if we've had 30 minutes of discussion and there's no second, haven't we just wasted 30 minutes of time? So that's why it's important. Start with the motion, you start with the second. And if you get both of those, it's stated by the chair, and then you have the discussion.
Would it be fair to say then, when the agenda is developed by the mayor and or, two council members that agree to have something on the agenda item, that the agenda item is a motion in itself, motion to approve direction that city staff needs to do something, or motion to approve a subdivision in the city, or motion to deny, a subdivision in the city, something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, without sort of delving too far into your specific process of how things get on the agenda, if those agendas have to be developed a week in advance so they can be posted timely, right? If I'm like, yeah, sure, like I'll support that being on the agenda, that's not the same as me, maybe supporting it in the meeting. Because maybe I've changed my mind since then, right? Just because I was like, yeah, I'll support it getting on the agenda. Well, maybe we've done something since then where now we don't need to do this. And I think an assumption that just because it's on the agenda, we must talk about it. I wouldn't want to draw that sort of fine line for a bunch of reasons. Practically, what if that second person's not there? What if that first person's not there? What if I'm like, oh man, I got to get this on the agenda. It's really, really important. I've got a lot of knowledge about this. And then the meeting rolls around and I don't show up. Well, should we make a decision without the person who knows the most things about this? Like, that's right. Just because, however it gets on the agenda, you've got a notice requirement, you've got a public expectation requirement, but that's not the same thing as seconding it in the meeting. In part because you could change your motion. Say we put something on the agenda, and whenever you make it, it's different than what I was thinking it was gonna be. Well, maybe now I don't want to second it. So, I wouldn't say just a default. Yes, sir.
So you're saying we should probably reach out to staff ahead of time about that specific agenda item to do research as to what the purpose of it
It
is?
seems like a trap.
It is.
I think I knew it was. I think it's always better without knowing anything about, I can't stress enough, I don't know anything about your meetings. I think it's always better to come to meetings prepared. I'm not your lawyer, but I think there's a fiduciary duty that board members have to come to meetings prepared.
I think I will chime in on that one, actually. On Councilman Isaacs' comment, we got to circle back. There are times where an agenda item is from the council, two of them put something on the agenda. There are times where a citizen might ask for a rezoning, which is different from them making a motion to place it on there. So maybe we can unpack what that might look like if we're applying rules to a citizen asking to rezone a parcel.
Well, I mean, I think it's the same, that's a great question, Dave. I think it's the same standard. Just like I was talking about with you, sir. Just because it's on the agenda, if nobody moves, if nobody has a motion about that item, I mean, I think we're at agenda item number 8. Is there a motion? Is there a motion? Somebody makes a motion, okay. Is there a second? Somebody makes a second or not? Nobody makes a second, you move on to agenda item number 9.
So I am gonna ask you, like, developments are a lot that goes on here. So on the development, we have city staff present that to us as the item, and then we allow the developer to speak on what they want. what's the process on that, on how do we have discussion?
I think that's exactly right. I think those are reports, basically. Like, that's a report of your staff, it's a report of city management, whoever that might be, and then there's a related report. None of those other people are members. Like, they're presenting you information. You can ask questions about that, you can formulate ideas about that, but until somebody makes one of your voting members makes a motion, there's no discussion about, is this a good idea or a bad idea?
So we hear the report.
Yes,
And if there's no motion, we just go to the next item.
absolutely.
You know, a lot of times when we talk about that council on boards, you may notice where I try to say, okay, you're good, you can sit down now. And so the reason I'm doing that is the report has now ended. When I'm telling them to sit down, it's for this reason, which is now it's your time. So if the applicant speaks, staff speaks, they sit down, you've asked your questions, now it's your show, and that's where this kicks in.
Correct, and I think that's a good rule of thumb, and why this is so important is once that motion is made, that triggers sort of this special process that's unique to only the voting members. Right?
If there's not a motion, and you said you move on to the next item, what happens to that particular item?
Nothing.
So it doesn't go on the next agenda, it just falls off and dies?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely, and I see I'll come right back to you. And the important thing about that is there was no appetite from the people who could make that motion, who could vote on that, to do anything with it. And just to say it moves on to the next agenda, I mean, there's motions to do that, to move to the next agenda. Those weren't made. I mean, if whatever the process is to get something on the agenda, if that's followed next time, then it shows up on the agenda. But it shouldn't be automatic. Yes, sir.
So should we be separating presentations, item A, discussion and possible actions, item B, or can they all be in one combined?
I think you can do those however you want to do those, but I do think there is a cleanliness to, we know we're not making motions from these things, and that helps better set expectations, not just for the members, but for everybody else as well. And maybe it helps set expectations for those coming to present. Because one of the things that I think is a challenge sometimes is, if you don't come to these meetings every month, you have no idea what to expect. So I'm gonna come, I'm gonna make a report, I'm gonna plead my case on something, and then just like your attorney was saying, you know, then he's waving them to go sit down, because they don't know what to expect. They don't know, do you need something more from them? So if you're setting those expectations, and you could put on your agenda, you know, this is, you know, no motions will be made from these reports. Like, you know, they're just reports. You can add some, whatever sort of disclaimer you want there. And then on the next section, you know, here are possible action items, right? But they're possible action items. Nobody wants to do them, or if not, more than one person wants to do them. We don't even talk about them, let alone vote on them.
For like planning and zoning, do we not have a duty, like when a resident wants a rezone, to vote yes or no on it? I mean, we can just let it die if nobody wants to take a motion on it?
Well, that one's statutory, that one's specific, where you have to give a yes or a no, right? The statute says you have to make a recommendation.
Okay, so there are some things in that.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, but what about the council?
Ask your question.
So it comes to the council of being denied by the planning commission?
Council has 30 days.
Yeah, but the item comes to the agenda.
The zoning item, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
To rezone, it comes to the council. We hear the city staff's report, we hear the applicant's report. If there's no motion for us to discuss that, it just goes away.
Well, zoning's different because the law says we have to act within a certain time period. So what he's teaching you now would be for anything besides like a zoning change that has a set, you have to decide under this time. Because we don't get pocket vetoes, right, on land use. So, that's just a specific caveat.
Yeah, and there will, and I appreciate it, and that's a great question. There may be certain things that you must take an action on.
Okay.
Right, like, you know, that may be something you must take an action on. You know, at some point, you must take an action on a fiscal year budget. How you do that, when you do that, maybe you've got some flexibility. But there are things that you must do under the law that, you know, I mean, you could, again, I'm not your attorney, you could not do it, but there are consequences of not doing it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, nobody can force you to do anything, but there are consequences of that. So, I think that's the best way to answer that. That's a great point. That's a great clarification. So motion second, stated by the presiding officer, you have your discussion in this, yes, sir, I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'm not chair of a 5-member board, not a 15-member assembly. So if I look at this 6 stages of handling business, it sounds like after there's a motion and a second, I have to shut up. I'm not involved in the discussion. I can't make a amending motion.
Are you the chair?
I'm the chair.
That's exactly right.
I can't vote.
That's exactly right.
So I'm emasculated.
Well, you're the chair. The chair's job, what did I say about the presiding officer before? It's the chair's job
That's what I'm saying, is that
to be impartial.
I'm understanding that, but that's kind of not what I signed up for.
Yeah, I'll double check that, because we have a specific rule on voting members for committees, so I'll check yours. I haven't looked at that one recently. I know for the mayor, we've gone over that.
So, in regardless of whether you can vote or not, I mean, because every member, again, with the of the mayor, because that's a unique deal, like, even in other organizations, the chair can vote if it affects the outcome.
And I got that out of reading my Robert's Rules of Order, not just of your, not just your slide. So,
But the point is when you accepted the obligation of being the chair, you
I was ignorant.
We're recording this?
There's a track.
Whately had no one else on the board that wanted the job, so I was elected.
And because of your selfless sacrifice.
Okay. I'm just pointing out that it just doesn't, give me the chance to get my opinion.
And I'll come right to you, sir. That's exactly the point, is the person facilitating and running the meeting doesn't get to give their opinion. In terms of running the meeting in impartiality. Because the point of the chair, the point of presiding is to ensure a fair meeting, right? And if you're giving a motion, if you're debating, if you're actively persuading people, don't the people on the other side think that there might be an opportunity for you to treat them unfairly?
Could a board make board-specific rules?
100%.
So we can make a rule that the speakers, the managers allowed to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But you've got to make you've got to make sort of that exception for Roberts, however that happens. And the easiest way to do that is to say, we're going to opt for Roberts' small board rules. So, sir, you had your hand.
Yes, I'd like you to back up on that decision a little bit, because every board we have in the city is a 5-member board and the chairman is elected from one of those members, unlike the council, which has a mayor elected at large. And that person is an integral part of that board discussion as well as chairing it. And I think we ought to look at that a little bit different.
So let me just say, and I appreciate that context. Let me just say, that's exactly, what I've shared is exactly what Robert says. And what Robert says is basically, if you're a decision-making body, the chair should remain impartial because they're a decision-making body. So if there's a board or a committee or a commission that has decision-making authority, I think that provision would apply. But Robert says two things, back to the conversation we were just having. If you don't like it, you can change it. You don't have to follow Roberts because it was written in 1876. Just adopt your own rule. You can absolutely do that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, there are provisions in Roberts to speak to exactly your point of when you've got smaller groups that maybe you need that opinion, you can have it. You just have to be specific that you want it. The default is you don't.
That's all I was just gonna say. We can clarify that with the local rule if we want to address it.
Absolutely, yeah. And to be totally clear, like I'm giving y'all Robert's presentation right now. I mean, it's only important because y'all say it's important, right? And it should be. Like, you should have something, because if you don't have anything, what's a motion, right? Like, what's a second? Like, how do you vote on those types of things? So, great comments. I appreciate that.
CJ, on when you go from the second and you call the question, you vote. Let's say they vote to approve something, and that item fails to pass. What's next?
Yeah. So you're talking about like you've got 2 motions pending.
We've only made one. We've only made one, but we could make others. That's what I want to unpack.
Yeah, so in this discussion phase, so we've got a motion, we've got a second, it's been stated by the presiding officer. That third step is important, because once it's been stated by the presiding officer, that's that chair's opportunity to provide clarity. This is what we're debating on, this is what we're discussing, this is, assuming nothing else changes, this is what we'll vote on. In that discussion is where you can make all those other motions. I don't like this, I want to move to amend. I think we need more time, I'm gonna move to postpone. I don't, we spent too much time debating this already, I'm gonna move the previous question. That's where all of those things happen, is at the discussion phase. And if a motion to amend gets made, I move to strike this and insert that, you just do this circle. I always use the example, I move to paint the boardroom blue, it's an easy example. That's the pending question, that's what we've been talking about for 10 minutes. I move to paint the boardroom blue, somebody gets up and says, I move to strike blue and insert orange. Is there a second? It's moved and seconded to strike blue and insert orange. Now, we're on that fourth step of debating, should we strike blue and insert orange? And the only thing that we're talking about, is it a good idea to strike blue and insert orange? We're not talking about the underlying motion. We're gonna get back to that. All we're talking about is this amendment, the pending question, the pending motion, a good idea or a bad idea. That's it. We take the vote on that, call the roll, maybe it passes, I assume it passes. Because why wouldn't it pass? Orange is clearly the right color.
Yes.
I saw the cup, I knew I was gonna get a yes from this guy right here. Say, they strike blue, insert orange, you take the vote, the chair says, the ayes have it, the amendment is adopted, the motion now reads, and we paint the boardroom orange. Now we're abundantly clear, we're back to where we started with this amendment, with this change, and we're right back in discussion. Like we never left, as we add motions, we always come back right back to discussion, because that's the only time you can make those motions, is in that discussion phase. Is there any further discussion on the main motion as amended, which is to paint the boardroom orange? It's abundantly clear what we're doing, right? You do all the discussion, you have all the conversation, and again, once you get into this discussion phase, Roberts limits you. You can adopt a rule that says otherwise, but once everyone has had the opportunity to speak twice, that's the max you get, is to speak twice. Once you've spoken twice, you're supposed to go to the vote. And if I'm the presiding officer, again, think about where I work. I've got a bit of a reputation of being a bit too stringent on the rules. Once you've spoken twice, if you try to speak a third time, here's what I'm going to do. The member who's trying to speak has already spoken twice. Is there any objection to letting that member speak a third time? And I'm going to ask for approval for that. That's a suspension of the rules, and that's really important. Because if I don't, now I'm treating that member differently than how I might treat somebody else. Right? And if you want to do something different, adopt a rule. You can do that, but that's what the default in Roberts is twice. Once you've done that, you move on to the vote. And what I do, sort of a pro tip, is I print off a spreadsheet of the members' names and then a bunch of blank item columns at the top. I do tally marks. If it's been an hour, I don't know if you've already spoken, or if it was on the amendment, or if it was on something else, so I'm gonna keep tally marks. Sir.
So it's 2 on orange, 2 on blue?
Yep. Yep. 2 times per debatable motion. Main motion is debatable, amendment is debatable.
Can you ask to suspend the rules for yourself so you can speak a third time?
Yep. Is there a second?
No.
There's no second, and it's not debatable. Suspend rules isn't debatable, so yeah, that happens all the time, and oftentimes the other group's like, nah, that's okay. We know where you're at. So do the discussion, you go to the vote. Y'all have to vote in a particular way because you're a public body. You do the roll call vote on everything. But once that's announced, the chair says the ayes have it, the motion is adopted or not adopted, and you basically finish that statement, you move on to the next thing. We will paint the boardroom blue, the FY27 budget has been approved, whatever happened, make that statement, and then the next agenda item is blank. Is there a motion, please? That makes sense? Any thoughts on that? Regardless of whether you think the chair should be able to speak or not, and we all agree with this process, at least? Anybody disagree with this process? When you're making a decision. You can print this out, I'll send it to Daniel, you can laminate it, bring it to every meeting, like you're at number 4. Frequently used motions, we've talked about sort of the processing of motion. I want to talk briefly about frequently used motions. These are the motions that are going to come up most often. Amend, commit, which is commit or refer, postpone to a certain time, previous question, which is close debate, vote immediately, recess and adjourn. We all know what these means. What's missing? What's not on here? What's a motion you use all the time that's not on here?
Approve, deny?
Well, that's yes or no. That's just the main motion. Right? These are all subsidiary motions. What's not on here? It's my favorite part. You ever use the motion to table?
Yes.
I got yeses and nos.
Yes.
We do, right. What does that mean? Postpone? To when? Okay, is that what everyone thinks the table means?
Kill it. No.
Oh, it means to kill it. What do you think it means?
Means, say at a certain time, you can bring it up anytime you want to, again.
Okay, so you can come back up later?
Yeah.
Right, basically, if we table it? Okay, so you think it means to postpone it to the next meeting? You think it means that it can, once we do, we can bring it back up at any time we do it? You think it means to kill it? Oh my gosh, what's the right answer? Well, you're all wrong, and that's okay. I got whole slides about this. Because of and the reason I asked it the way I asked it, the reason this is my favorite part is because all 3 of you, and maybe others too, had a different expectation for what this motion did. So when it happens, there's confusion, right? What should you do, and I'm gonna go through these slides, but what should you do if you want it to be on the next meeting? Yeah, postpone to the next meeting. That's, postpone to a certain time, postpone to the next meeting. If you want to kill it, I didn't put this motion up there, but if you want to kill it, what's the right motion under Roberts? It's postpone indefinitely. The reason I know table's wrong is because while Roberts has lots of overlapping rules, it doesn't have any overlapping motions. So if I've got postpone indefinitely, which kills it, postpone to a time certain, which moves it, what do I need table for? So what table is, Roberts has a whole section. It's called the misuses of the motion to table, because you are not alone. Like I said, there's an entire section I cited there. The motion laid on the table temporarily sets aside a main motion to address more urgent business, unlike postpone, which delays action to a specific time. The only purpose this has is we've got to do something more important right now. Let me give you a quick example, and then I'll move on, because you want me to get off my soapbox on this. You're in the middle of your meeting, and you're talking about whatever you're talking about, I know your chief of police is over here. He helped me get my computer set up along with her. Thank you very much. He walks in, red in the face, sweating, very briskly walks over to the mayor and whispers something in his ear because there's some sort of problem. There's some sort of issue. Whatever the issue is, doesn't matter, don't care. Use your imagination to make it up. And the mayor says, unfortunately, there's some issue that we've got to address. Is there any objection to laying this item on the table and we'll come back to it? Clearly, whatever the chief came in and said is more important. Or maybe you've got maybe you got a guest speaker come in and talk to you about all the virtues of parliamentary procedure. Who knows? Hypothetically. And say your guest speaker was running late. And you start your meeting, you're in the middle of so you skip that item of the guest speaker, you're in your meeting, you're in the middle of an item, guest speaker walks in, and you want to do that before you finish. Well, I move to lay this on the table. The more urgent item of business is our guest speaker is here. We want to take care of that business first. That's the only, those types of things are the only legitimate use of the motion to table. Because anything else we've got 3 different opinions, at least just at this table, of what that means. Right? And then let me just give you one other perspective. Who takes your minutes? Yeah, I assumed it was you. How does she know what to do if you say table? If you say I move to table this, and you expect it to come back at the next meeting, and she doesn't put it on the agenda, who's upset? You are. You're delighted, right? If you voted yes, like that's exactly what you expect. But how does she know? And now if she does what she thinks is right with that motion, now we've got some people who have different expectations. We've got unnecessary conflict because we used a motion that we all thought we had an understanding of, and yet it turns out we've all got a different understanding of that. So don't use the motion to table. Don't be like the legislature. This means something different in the legislature. It means something completely different. We don't use Roberts. But don't do things that are confusing. I've never been in a real life situation where the motion to table has come up. Kill it, postpone it indefinitely, vote it down, postpone to a time certain. Those are all the right choices. The motion to table is not. There's some others, sets aside. I really like this motion. So clearly there's a bunch of slides in here that you'll get as a resource. So let's talk quickly about voting. Most questions carried by a majority of those voting. Again, as we've already talked about, this is not true for you in your government public capacity. It's a majority of the entire board, majority of the entire group for something to pass. But if you're serving on a board or an organization that isn't a public body, it's always a majority of those voting. Always a majority of those voting. I added this in here this afternoon when I was working on this for y'all. The mayor votes only to break a tie. That's because that's what your charter says. You have a higher governing document that adds that limitation. Just like there's a higher governing document about a majority of those voting called the Open Meetings Act. That's going to override Roberts all the time. Again, not typically for a public body, a voice vote for the routine stuff. Y'all have to do a roll call vote because you're making decisions on behalf of your friends and neighbors in your community. It's got to be a roll call vote. That's because the law says we have to know how you voted. And then you always call for the no votes. This is less common in public bodies, but in a lot of groups that I'm sure you can think of groups that you've been a part of, the chair says all those in favor say aye. You know, it's most everybody, it's pretty clear it's going to pass, and they just say motion adopted, right? Happens pretty routinely. You can't do that. You've always got to ask for the no votes. Because why? We make decisions based off of votes, not volume. If you only heard one side of it, we're basing a decision on volume, not votes. All right, let's talk about managing conflict.
Can we go back just a second?
Absolutely. The way to manage conflict is just say yes all the time.
Back up on the slide. Okay, it says the mayor votes only to break a tie, which is true and all that. So should the mayor be making any motions?
Our charter says they can make motions.
So I've not read your charter, to be totally honest with you, because I don't live here. It didn't impact me. If there's no prohibition on that, I mean, it's certainly an option. The impartiality requirement, like the conversation we were just having, if Roberts is binding, it's going to apply. But again, a council can decide what it wants to do for its own rules too. So as long as there's no prohibition on that in the charter, the council could certainly vary something from Roberts. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? I will also say, I do think there are times where the chair can assume motions. So let me give you an example, and Roberts is pretty clear about this. Is there any objection to taking a 10-minute recess? Like the chair can just say that, right? Well, that's a motion. Is that out of order? Roberts says no. You can assume that motion. Now, if there's an objection, somebody objects, I object to taking a 10-minute recess. You need to do it the right way. Okay, well, is there a motion to take a recess? Is there a second? There's no debate on a recess, depending on when it's made, so, maybe you just go right to the vote on that. That's a good question. But again, it's always going to be, the higher governing document is always going to apply, And even when Roberts does apply, you can adopt a rule that gives you that flexibility. Good question. All right, managing conflict. So the chair keeps order, sort of along those lines. This is true in every case. The chair keeps order, but isn't the last word. So if I tell you, if I'm the chair and I tell you can't do something, you can appeal. You can disagree with me, and we'll talk through that. The chair rules on procedure to keep the meeting running. We've elected a chair, we've elected a mayor, committee chair, whatever it might be, to keep the meeting running, to move it along. And so it's their job to say, that's out of order, that's not in order, you're being dilatory, that's an offensive comment, you know, that's being disrespectful. Like, that's what we've chosen that person to do by nature of their role. That doesn't mean we have to agree with them all the time, right? And if you don't agree, that's okay. A member who disagrees is not stuck and is not powerless. The board, by majority, can overrule the chair. And there's a process for that. And the process, which will be on the next slides, is not yelling and screaming and throwing things. I've had shoes thrown at me, actually, at a meeting before, because I told somebody they had to be quiet. So they threw a shoe at me. Still not the guy who got arrested. It was not the dog. And that's okay. You can disagree. The point of what we're talking about is how to manage disagreement. We can disagree with each other and still be respectful. And that's what fundamentally what meeting procedure is. Knowing this channel exists lowers the temperature for everyone. So what's the point of order? I rise to point of order. This would normally happen if somebody's doing something that you think is not in order and the chair hasn't ruled them out of order, or maybe the chair didn't notice it. You can say, point of order, the comments that the previous speaker said was violated decorum. They were talking about my motives for doing this. Well, as we just heard, you can't do that. The chair should say, your point's well taken. The chair will remind people to keep their comments on the motion and not members' motives. So you say, point well taken, not well taken. It's not an attack on the chair to disagree with them. It's not. We can all disagree on an opinion. Now, if the chair basically says, without somebody raising a point of order, that was disrespectful, we're not going to recognize you, we're going to move on, for whatever reason, you've got an option, whether it's through a point of order or the chair doing it on its own. You can appeal. You can appeal the decision of the chair. This is one of the most powerful tools for members in Roberts, is appealing. I get recognized, I appeal from the decision of the chair. When you disagree with the chair's ruling, you can ask the board to vote on it. For almost every case, there's an opportunity for limited debate on appeal. And this is the one time where the chair gets to speak. And the way basically the process is, member says I appeal, it needs a second. The chair may briefly explain the ruling. The reason I ruled the person out of order was because they weren't recognized, they violated the rules of decorum, no motion's been made, so we don't have there's nothing to discuss right now. Whatever the reason is, the chair gets to explain. The board decides by a majority vote, not the chair. There's an opportunity for debate, but it's not the 2 times. It's 1 time. Everyone gets an opportunity to speak once on an appeal, except for the chair. The chair gets to speak twice. Explain it at the beginning, ask, does anybody wish to debate the appeal? Likely the member who's appealing says, I think the chair's wrong, I wasn't questioning the member's motives, blah, blah, blah. Somebody else could debate that appeal. But then you just go to the vote, and the chair can say, well, again, the reason I ruled this way, the chair's opinion, whatever the reason is, attacks a member, not respectful, whatever. And then you take the vote. It takes a majority to overrule the chair. To be super clear about this, it takes a majority to overrule the chair. If it's not a majority, it doesn't overrule the chair. If it's a tie, the chair doesn't have to vote here because it doesn't overrule the chair. It takes a majority to sustain the chair's ruling. Why an appeal beats arguing? So, I think one of the reasons why in meetings we get frustrated and maybe our temperature raises, not that it's ever happened here, But one of the reasons I think we feel frustrated is because we don't know what our procedural options are. Like, we don't know what to do when we're in a situation that we don't understand. And we're passionate, you clearly care about your community, you clearly care about whatever issues that you're facing. You know, you signed up to do whatever you're doing. You clearly are passionate, you clearly care. And when we're told no, or we hear something we don't like, it's human nature to react negatively, right? If you don't believe that, go check the Facebook comments. That's human nature, right? But we also don't know what to do. The chair told me to basically, you know, in my head, the chair just told me to shut up because I'm dumb, even though he said, you know, you're attacking a member's motives. Right? That's literally what the chair said. What I heard is I'm stupid, right? Not what he said, but that's what we heard. And I don't know what to do about that. Like, now I feel like I've been attacked and I don't have an avenue to get out of it. But you do. The chair ruled that you were being dilatory or, you know, disruptive or disrespectful, whatever the case may be, and you can say, I appeal. I'd like the whole group to determine if I was being disrespectful. And when the vote happens, you move on. Because now you know how everybody else feels about what you were doing, right? And you've taken a formal vote, you've done a formal thing, and you've gotten basically a formal opinion on everybody on that issue, on that conduct. And I think that is really, really powerful. Because if you can say like, oh, I appeal, like I just disagree, I appeal the decision of the chair, and you don't get mad, you don't get angry, and you don't, yell and scream or whatever the issues might be, I think people take that a lot more seriously. People have a lot more respect for the process and for the people involved because they're seeing people disagree in public and being respectful about doing it. And I think that's really powerful, personally. But that's also what the requirement is. It's also what Robert says to do. So I think it's important for that reason, as well. So why appeal beats arguing? It gives that frustrated member a real dignified avenue, a real reason, a real opportunity to have whatever decision changed. And sometimes the chair's going to lose an appeal, and whatever that appeal was, okay, well, the appeal is a decision of the chair is overruled. Please continue with your remarks. Like that's what should happen, if that's what the body thinks should happen. So it's a real dignified avenue to resolve that. It does resolve dispute by a vote. Not by, man, I'm gonna go back and change the slide. It decides it by vote, not by volume, not by who's louder. That's so good. Which is what we should do. It's what we should do. It puts the decision where it belongs with the whole board and not an individual member. And it takes about a minute. You do the whole process, like the whole process I explained, it takes about a minute. How long have y'all spent yelling at each other when it could have taken about a minute? I don't want to answer for that. Just think about that. It's rhetorical. Just think about that, right? How often do we spend time on things like that when there's a real avenue, when there's a real procedure that we can do? So I think that's important. Yes, sir.
Can you call a point of order on anybody?
Anybody that's in violation of the rules. Point of order, so a point of order, great question. A point of order should only be used when there's a violation of the rules. When somebody is breaking a rule, breaking a procedure that's established. A point of order is not like, I don't like what they're saying. It's, they have violated some rule. Because, and the reason it's just about violating some rule is because as long as they're being disrespectful, as long as they're being respectful, as long as they're not being disrespectful, we don't have to like what they say. We can just disagree and move on. Like, the whole point of the debate is I say this to members of the legislature, so I'm going to say it here too. And they find it equally offensive as you're going to. Don't worry. The debate is not the opportunity to grandstand. The debate is the opportunity to change the members of your voting board's mind. Like, that's the point of discussion and debate. And I know y'all have a dual role of convincing each other and informing the public. I know that. And I know there are always politics involved, and local politics are just so fun. I know there's politics involved, but the point of in this meeting, at this gathering, what we're doing is about making decisions together, not messaging, or as a soon-to-be former member calls it, peacocking, right? That's not the goal of the meeting. His name is Scott Beckgatter. He would have no problem me saying that out loud. So anyway, so let's talk about closing the debate the right way. So we talked about, the chair, appeal, points of order. Let's talk about closing debate the right way. I've talked about this a little bit. The chair should, the chair has no additional authority on motions or anything like that than anybody else, as long as we're still in the rules. Now, if the chair said, it appears that every member of the council has now spoken twice on this motion, that's not violating the rules to cut off debate. Nobody else has the right to speak. Like, what should we do here? Like, okay, well, we're gonna go to the vote now, because everyone's exhausted their right to speak twice on this motion. But that tally sheet's really important. Unless that's happened, unless you know nobody else can speak, this is done by motion. I mean, somebody can say, I call the question, I move the previous question, but it's a motion. You don't just get to yell it out, right? Like, you can't just, I call the question. Like, I'd like to get recognized, CJ, you're recognized. I move to close debate and vote immediately, or I move previous question, or I call the question. Is there a second? It's moved and seconded to close debate and vote immediately, basically. All those in favor of closing debate and vote immediately, raise your hand. Or do the roll call vote. I mean, yeah. I mean, as long as it's 2/3 of those voting, you close the debate and move on. And you just go right to the vote. The ayes have it. We voted to close the debate. The clerk will call the roll for a vote on the motion to paint the boardroom blue.
What if two members are wanting to ask questions back and forth, like ask question, debate back and forth on the two-rule talking?
So there's a difference between debate and a question, a request for information, basically. And if it's a genuine question, it's still got to be done through the chair. Mr. Chair, I have a question, I have a request for information, whatever it is. How much money is this going to cost? Like, that's not debate. Like, I need information to make a decision. How much money is this going to cost? That's not the same thing as debate. But what is debate is, would you agree that this is going to cost a whole lot of money and maybe we shouldn't do it? Well, that's technically a question. But that's very much debate too, right? So there is a line of, having questions back and forth and debating back and forth. And my guess is there's a lot of both. There's a lot of legitimate questions. Those should be answered. But once it starts moving into, I'm asking a question, but I'm also giving my opinion at the same time, like, that's not a question. Like, and I would say that, like, the chair should say, that's not a question. If you have a legitimate factual question, factual inquiry, get to your point. This is not, if you want to get recognized for debate, I'll recognize you for debate. It's a good question. It needs a second, closing debate is not debatable. Again, we don't debate debate. It takes a 2/3 vote. And again, because it takes away that right. A couple of other tools for heated moments. You can also limit debate too. Closing debate is one thing. We're going to stop debate entirely is one thing. You could limit debate too. You could adopt a rule that is a permanent rule that says debate's limited to up to 3 minutes per person, twice per debatable motion. You could adopt a rule that says that. Just because Robert says 10 minutes does not mean you should follow it. This is the number one rule that is, in my opinion, has changed from Robert's is we're going to drop that 10 minutes to 3 minutes. You could change that. That's the way, and most of the time, like when meetings get heated, it's because we've let debate go on for too long. Like, we're no longer being productive because we no longer have really good points about why this is a good idea or a bad idea. We've resorted to personal attacks because it's easy for us to do that, right? So you could do that. You could take a recess. Whenever you start to feel like it's getting heated, like maybe, is there any objection to taking a recess for 10 minutes, or you can move to take a recess. I move to recess for 10 minutes. That's a really great way to cool down. To just step away for a couple minutes and disengage. That's a great way to do that. You can reconsider. Again, I said earlier, once we've decided something, you shouldn't. But if, maybe you made a decision and then later on you did the budget and now you no longer have the money for that thing, and maybe that's a source of contention now, you could just go back and reconsider that. I mean, it's still in the same meeting, I think. I mean, those are some things that you can do. As long as you follow the rules on that, there's a couple of rules on that. And you can refer it. Sometimes you get an item on the agenda that is just so hot and heavy and contentious that, we know we're not making a decision on this. Like, we know, this isn't the right environment. We know we don't have enough information. So maybe we postpone to the next meeting. Maybe we refer it to the city manager to do some research and report back at the next meeting. That's an easy way to say, like, hey, we've talked about this, like, we need more information. We're not kicking it down the road. We're sending it somewhere to get more information to report back. You're still dealing with it in a way that processes it. You still get to have conversations about it. You're just not ultimately deciding. We're going to get more information and come back with it. That's a good idea. Decorum, these are the guardrails. Like I said, if you start with a motion, that's going to limit it. It's going to limit what you can talk about. Because now, all we can talk about, is it a good idea or a bad idea to paint the boardroom blue? That's it. Anything that's not related to that, of painting the boardroom blue, not an order. We can't, and oftentimes it's, like, I think it's important to say, nobody likes being told no, myself included. It's important to say, we can't talk about that now, that may come up on a motion later on. Like, it's not always a no, but oftentimes it's a not right now. I do want to be clear, sometimes it's just a no. If it's not on the agenda, you can't talk about it. And again, why, going back to that slide, at the very beginning, we're protecting the rights of the absent, and in your case, the public. If we didn't tell people we were going to talk about it, we can't talk about it. It's really, really important. So you speak through the chair, not directly to each other.
I have a question about
Yes,
that.
sir.
When I worked for the legislature in Texas, they were speaking through the chair in committee hearings. They didn't always, it wasn't this question. Mr. Chairman, blah, 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 blah. Like asking a question of a presenter, for example, someone testifying. I know y'all don't take testimony in Oklahoma, but
we do.
Source of aggravation for me.
We
But
do.
anyway,
It's not
not
often.
very much, but anyway. But there wasn't this stilted thing where Mr. Chairman kind of motions okay, then you ask the question of the person at the mic, and then the person at the mic says, Mr. Chairman, and then refers to the person who asked the question. It's very stilted. That was how it worked in Arizona. So as long as everybody, I would argue that as long as everybody understands that whether you're, basically the chairman has already recognized you to be asking questions and everything. If you're doing it back and forth, it's very stilted and takes up unnecessary time.
So there's a big difference between asking questions and debate. Just like we talked about with this gentleman. Me asking you a question, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, like, I have a request for information, I have a question for the witness, I have a question for the city manager, I have a question for the person giving the report. You're recognized to ask a question. Thank you. Mr. City Manager, like, what's the financial impact of what we're doing here? He's gonna answer you back. That's not debate. What's
Right.
important to keep in mind is when you're in that moment where you're trying to convince people, you're trying to persuade people how to vote, is this a good idea or a bad idea? That's when this applies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me. I think this is a bad idea for the following reason.
Okay.
That's the distinction.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, the debate, that discussion amongst those voting members should go through the chair, because if I said, well, I think, I think that's a terrible idea, and I'm looking right at you, and, the point that you made, I just disagree with, I think it's stupid, and blah, 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 you're probably gonna take offense to that at some point, right? But if I said, Mr. Chairman, I disagree with the last speaker, the point that he made about law, about this thing, like, this is my perspective on it. I'm saying the same thing, but it's not directed at you.
Right.
And that does make a difference. So, but that's a phenomenal point. So you speak through the chair, debate the issue, never attack the person, wait to be recognized before speaking. You don't talk until the chair says, so-and-so you're recognized, or gives you a nod, or says go ahead, or whatever the standard is, for that. And it's important that these aren't formalities. They're what make disagreements safe. Disagreement is okay, but it's how we disagree and the methods that we disagree, that we're not leaving here with, sort of a bad taste in our mouth, sort of raised temperatures. So, great point. So I want to talk briefly about engaging the public. Again, this public meeting, that it's important. I always thought it was important when I was on the school board. Why do we do this? Well, it builds trust. It builds trust and legitimacy. If we're listening, and again, the same principles apply. We don't have to agree with public comment. We don't have to agree with the things that are being said. But the fact that people are being heard, whether they like the outcome or not, and sometimes we don't like the outcome, the opportunity to be heard is important. It surfaces information that we might not have thought of. We've all got a unique perspective, and if somebody else has got a different perspective, I want to hear that. I think making the best decision possible is the right thing to do. Maybe most importantly, it's often legally required. I'm going to leave that issue alone, but it's often legally required. And most importantly for me, people who feel heard escalate far less. People who feel heard escalate far less. Yes, sir.
Yeah, a couple questions, but maybe more for Mr. McClure. Am I correct in understanding of the Open Meetings Act, there's no requirement to allow public comment?
There's no requirement to allow public comment on regular agenda items. However, for zoning uses, for example, public hearing is required. So it depends on the type of item presented to the body.
Okay. And then, public comment on items not on the agenda. Am I correct to understand that the council should really not respond to those things because they're not on the agenda? We could be violating the Open Meetings Act by talking about something that's not on the agenda.
Correct. Yeah, that's why a lot of times if I'm running a meeting, I would always say I've been in the legislature quite frankly. I say, man, I sure wish we could talk about this, but that dang legislature made where I can't respond to that. That's what I typically say. Feel free to pass that one along, CJ.
Oh, I'll take it. I mean, I fully expect y'all to say like, oh yeah, we can't let you do that because CJ said at that last training we couldn't do that. That's totally fine. You can always make me the bad guy. Great comments. But so, I think public comments are important, and sort of to your point, it's also important to structure the public comment period. And when I say structure, one of the things that I know Daniel and I learned in law school, you can boil down almost all of working as a lawyer to two things: setting expectations and risk management, right? That's it. That's it. Structuring the public comment is setting expectations. If I have an idea of what to expect when I walk in the door, of when I get to speak, how much time, is the council going to engage? Are they not going to engage? What does that look like? If you set that expectation in advance, then I'm not surprised. But if I don't know what to expect, if I walk up and I give you my opinion and you say thank you, to your point, well, now I feel like, well, why did I waste my time coming here? Because I don't know that you can't respond. I don't know that it's illegal for you to respond, right? So I think when you do that, like, it's important to set those, to publish or promote or put on the screen what are those expectations for public comment. And it's not to stifle any of those voices, it's just to set those expectations, because you're gonna hear it. But if it's not on the agenda, and I'm really passionate about it, maybe it gets on the next agenda because I came and said something, but even if we're not gonna talk about it here. So, designated time on the agenda for public comment. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we already found one contradiction in our rules versus the charter. In our rules, in section 6, hearing of citizens, subsection E says, councilors may, after obtaining or ask questions of speakers during public comment. And it seems to be public comment is violating to that is referring to that public comment at the beginning of the meeting. So anyway, it's a contradiction, I guess.
I've always applied that section to the public hearing section.
To the public hearing.
Because we're actually allowed to do that.
Then we probably, all right, I've already found one amendment I need to make to our rules. I guess we need to amend clarify the language on that one too.
Perfect, we're gonna start with a motion.
Yeah, exactly.
So designated time for public comment, again, setting that expectation. Clear time limits applied evenly to everyone. So here's what I do. This is my preferred way to handle public comment. I'm gonna put the timer on the screen. And when that timer hits 0, I either want you to stop talking or I'm gonna interrupt you. And I'm gonna do that every single time to every person, because even if I've got a timer on my phone and I'm applying it the same way every time, nobody knows that but me. So I like to put it on the screen so that everybody knows that when I cut you off, it's not because I care about what you're saying. It's because I don't want to treat anybody any different. So. Sign up for recognition by the chair, one speaker at a time. Comments is to the board through the chair, not a debate. This is not, I think what if you want to come and say, like, I disagree with what you're doing, that's okay. Remember the public. But it's not an opportunity to have a debate back and forth about what you agree or disagree with. So, and then keeping order, the chair, like I said, runs the room firmly, fairly, treat everybody with respect, enforce the same rules for everyone. Deliberation and decisions happen on the record in the meeting, and it's important that as things come up, pre-decide. We don't pre-decide out of the meeting. It is really important though, and this is a distinction that I want to make. You can have an opinion when you walk in the room. I think, every time I was on a school board, I read my packet in advance. I had an opinion about everything I was going to do before I walked into that meeting. But I was open to somebody changing my mind. Because when we get in that room and we have that conversation, and you make your points and I make my points, and I think through the issues, I hear those unintended consequences, I might do something different. That's not the same thing. So don't hear me say you can't have an opinion. If you've decided how you think you should vote on this based off your research, I think that's fine. But it's important that the point of the meeting is to come together and talk about it. And you can be persuaded. Yes, sir.
Moving back just a little bit. So there is no time as a councilman I can engage in a back and forth with a citizen in one of our meetings.
My opinion is no, but.
What was the question?
His question was how we can interact and debate back and forth with a citizen asking the question. The provision that Councilman Schlomack just read was the provision that there's a process to that. We have to work through that process, though. I think it was upon recognition, right, Councilman?
Yeah, look, I think it's like anything else. A citizen presents their point of view. And if you have a question, it could be clarifying, just a clarifying question, or it might be a question about, well, do you understand this implication of what you're saying? I think we have the right to ask questions. The issue becomes one where, in my experience, we're the ones voting, so we're asking the questions as opposed to the audience asking.
So I want to draw an important distinction. It's the exact same distinction I drew when we just had our conversation. Engaging and having basically having a debate with somebody, like, I don't think you can do that. Like, I think you can ask questions. You can get clarifying information. I think the way that you phrased that first question of, well, do you know what the implication would be if you did this? Like, I'd be very careful with that.
Yeah.
Because I think that gets to that line of debate. But I think it's okay to ask questions, but I don't think, what I heard you say, I can't engage. Like, I think you can ask a question, but I don't think anything but responding of, well, I disagree and here's why. Like, I don't think you can do that, in part because, is that on your agenda? Like, is that item on your agenda? And my opinion has always been, if that item is not on the agenda, the electeds who are there, can't engage with that, because we didn't tell the public that we, the council, are going to be doing that.
Right, well, I'm talking about in the case where we're accepting testimony on an agenda item.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the agenda. Our rules allow us to request permission of the chair and engage the person. Non-agenda items, no go.
Yeah, you're talking about the distinction between public hearing and hearing a citizen, correct?
Right.
I think that's an important distinction amongst all of this. Some of that distinction of debate versus question. Yes, sir.
No, I just want to say thank you.
All right, I'm gonna move through the rest of this pretty quickly because I got just a couple minutes left. So what does this all mean? You know, I've gone through a bunch of stuff. What does this all mean? First of all, I mean, for the chair, you gotta use an agenda. That's required by law anyway. What I like to do is I like to script out notes on each agenda item. That because it helps me, one, sort of think about like, what is this? You know, who's it coming from? Is it gonna be contentious? And how do I transition to the next thing? And it's not because I'm not a good presiding officer, it's not because I don't know what I'm doing. It's because in the heat of those meetings, and you've been on this for an hour and a half, you know, sometimes you just need that visual reminder that I can read of how to transition or how to get out to the next thing. Maybe it's as simple as, you know, this is an item that needs a vote. You know, sometimes there's lots of stuff on the agenda, and sometimes it's hard to know what needs a vote and what's just a report. State each motion clearly before debate, announce every result, use the board's tools, previous question, refer, closing debate, things like that, instead of the gavel, and stay visibly neutral. Again, I know that's hard in a situation like this where you're elected, you know, on behalf of the community, but in the context of that meeting, it's important that to enforce that impartiality and where the chair's authority comes from. For the members, make a motion. That's how you turn your concern into a proposal. That's how you can turn your idea into a reality. You disagree with the ruling, you can appeal. Don't argue, don't yell over the chair, you just appeal. We talk about one thing at a time, one person speaks at a time, and we speak through the chair, and we win with votes and not volume. And I would just tell you, having worked thousands of meetings and worked for the legislature for almost a decade, the louder you are, the more volume you have, the less likely you're gonna get what you're looking for. Because in my opinion, you're just turning people off. But if you can calmly, you know, I disagree with the chair and here's why, like that's gonna win people to your side a lot more often than volume. So, I did have a slide, but we're at time because we had some good questions where we could sort of practice, and I'm still happy to do that, because we also got started a little bit late, where we could pick something that got heated. It's sort of my favorite activity to do, where we could pick an item and just sort of practice. You know, run it the right way, start to finish, with abbreviated debate, obviously. You know, we can make a motion, debate it, try a point of order and appeal. I'm happy to serve as the presiding officer, or Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to do that. We can practice too. That's always an option, if you'd like. And we can see how much smoother it feels when we start with that motion. We start with that process. Before we do that, just to sort of recap everything, this is the last slide. Business happens by motions, those same 6 steps every time. The only exception is if it's not debatable. If it's not debatable, you don't have that discussion period. The chair keeps order, the board decides. You disagree, you can appeal. You want to end debate, you can move previous question. It's important to hear the public well, decide in public, and adopt simple rules of procedure and use them. That work for you. Just because Robert says it doesn't mean you must follow it. You got another process, you got something else you like, all you got to do is write it down and vote on it. And it's really important, but it's really important that you write it down and you vote on it, because otherwise, now we're setting an expectation that not everybody knows about. And when you turn over, when members turn over, or when staff turns over, and you're doing things differently than what Robert says, than what people expect, it causes confusion, it causes frustration. So, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. You know, I know it's about time, I know you've got a full agenda, but I'd be happy to answer any questions to sort of wrap up. Hopefully that was helpful.
Very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Without objection, I'd like to recess the council meeting and let the other boards adjourn their meetings. Planning Commission.
Committee has to adjourn.
Planning Commission.
Okay. Sorry. You're gonna adjourn the planning and zoning commission special meeting.
Board of Adjustments.
Library board is adjourned.
Parks and Rec.
BOA adjourned.
Parks and Recs. Park and Recs allow quorum.
Yes. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go back to item number 4, citizen comments. Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to take a 5-minute recess to go to the bathroom. Second. Byron, seconded. Rob. Ron.
Aye.
Matt.
Aye.
Byron. Aye. Ron.
We'll do the public comment in 5 minutes. Taking a bathroom break.
Rob.
This meeting back to order. Item 4, citizen comments. Sean Nelson.
Mike's up here, we're backwards today.
Okay. I guess I can't see the timer. Hello. Shauna Nelson, 9323 Piedmont Road North. Okay, I'd like to say thank you for having this training. This is really interesting. I used to work in the school district, so I've been to a lot of these meetings. I am kind of disappointed though that we took the time to do this meeting. We had 2 town halls for the comp plan, but we haven't had any town halls or any meetings for information on the data center. I do want to say I have been waiting 6 weeks for an open records request. 2 weeks ago, you told me, Mr. Attorney, that you had reviewed them and I still haven't received any. So I think 6 weeks is pretty extensive considering some of my requests. There were 7 different requests. It was pretty simple. So I do think not getting that information in a timely manner impedes my ability to do any research. I'd like to note that minutes have been incorrect, yet they've been approved and not corrected. The minutes, the agendas are still not available online. The planning commission minutes are still not available. There's a bunch more missing. I know I brought that up at another meeting. And I think with the transparency that we keep talking about, all ordinances and resolutions should be readily available online. In the document library, it does show some of the publications. There's a publication, I believe, from 2020 or 2022 that has the some of the resolutions. Some of them are signed, some of them aren't, so you don't really know if they've really been adopted. If you go on the Municipal Code online, it does reference a lot of the resolutions, a lot of the ordinances, whether they've been incorporated or not. Not all of them are referenced, which I think led to a little bit of confusion last week when we were talking about this ordinance in 23 versus the ordinance from 2010. The ordinance from 2010 has never been referenced in the Municipal Code, although that was found in the document center. So it's really confusing as to what's current on there. And I think that's it. Oh, one more thing. About the comments back and forth. I know at the special meeting, there was questions asked about the budget. So I think if we could just clarify that, because there were some questions back and forth, and I appreciate that because I had a statement, there was questions from the board, and I think that's good to be able to continue something like that. But I do think the precedent has been set. I've seen in past minutes where it's been said that people can't say anything, so I'm glad that's getting clarified. Thank you.
Thank you. Roy Nelson.
Roy Nelson, 9323 Piedmont Road North. Mr. Mayor and Council, I really appreciate the training. Training was great. I also.
Pull the plus.
There you go.
Oh, and she is.
So I really appreciate the training. I think the training was really informative. It was like drinking from a fire hose. I can learn things really fast typically, and I know that I couldn't retain all that. So I did ask if we'd be able to review the training or when he was speaking again, because I would go to another speaking engagement to listen to him again. He said he would give the slides, so if we can get those, when we get the slides, if we can get them published, and then if we can just double check the audio so we can listen to the meeting again, I'd appreciate that. Thank you for resolution 092523, and Jonathan, thank you for all the engagement. You're speaking, whether we always agree or not, that's regardless, right? But knowing what your council member is thinking, and at least having them engage you when you ask for like, well, where is that? And try to get it to you. I know that he's engaging, so I appreciate that. The public speaking form, if you look at that, has 2 sections for public comment, and both of them say items listed on the agenda, if we can get that corrected. And then I made a note on this, if we want to give it to somebody, but can we just get it corrected, because it's very
We saw
hard
it
to
today.
tell what to mark on there. I had a couple questions for the trainer, but, so if there's bias from a member of the board or the chair, how is that dealt with? And I didn't really hear that talk about, but I was trying to read the charter this week, trying to read the rules, trying to read the resolution, understand all those parts. When somebody has a conflict, abstaining, and all the other different things. And I'm still a little bit unclear on some of those rules. So I'm bringing that up so that maybe you guys can review that, understand that, and we can figure it out together. Maybe a talking point in the upcoming agenda of understanding of some of those rules would be appreciated. What do we do if a motion or a vote does not follow the intent? So in an example, planning and zoning had an intent, I believe, and this has been talked about, but the motion was made, and I think they believed that the intent of the motion was what the motion was, and I don't think that was what was recorded, because it wasn't actually the motion. These rules of like how the motion, then the motion getting repeated and stuff would have solved that, but the rules weren't followed. And I'm not blaming anyone in particular. I mean, we just didn't know, right? It was, can I have an extension, please? I'm really close.
The speaker would like to have an extension.
Hang on, let me check the rules. We're gonna follow these rules every time. Let me check.
I believe the 4 people will be under 2 minutes, so I'll move to give them an extra 2 minutes.
We're gonna check the rules. We're gonna start.
You guys went before me, come to the place, but I know it's in there somewhere.
6C.
6C, all right, there it is. Speakers under 3 minutes, unless the majority of the council members present vote to extend the time. There's a motion to extend the time. Is that your motion, Robert?
Yes, it is. Do I have a second? I'll second it.
I'll vote.
Rob? Aye. Jonathan?
Aye.
Matt? Aye. Ron? Aye. Aye.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Point well taken.
When it comes to audience reaction, it's violation of decorum to do anything other than be silent.
Yes, please be silent in that gallery. Thank you.
Thank you for the extension, I appreciate it. So, I don't think that the intent of that motion was fully captured, and I think it was honest mistake. But is there a way to correct things like that, or how does that get looked into? I mean, I know that, I don't know, I think that it was looked into by some, but if there's a way to rectify those things, can we look into how that happens and what would happen with that? Because the motion that we thought was being made and the motion that was recorded were not the same. I think that was the end of what I had to say. So I appreciate the extension, appreciate your time, and really appreciate the training for the information. Thanks.
Scott Merrill?
Very long walk. My name is Scott Morrow, 3833 Moffett Road, Northwest, right next to the corner lot, right next to it. My family's gonna be living, breathing it if you pass this. Piedmont Forum has put a lot of money into getting an attorney. We have not heard, I guess I've asked, is he able to speak more than 3 minutes? I was trying to raise my hand. So, no, we're not gonna let somebody speak on behalf of the citizens. Alright,
It's not on the agenda, I can't discuss that.
okay, but I mean, I'll bring it up again, so just that, or I'll email, text, phone call, email, whatever. Because I feel like the attorneys that we pay a lot of money for, they should be able to speak. He's way more knowledgeable than I am. He can speak better than I can. He should be a voice for us and should be able to speak more than 3 minutes, since the person for Cloverleaf or whoever will be able to speak as long as they want, unless we're gonna let them do 3 minutes too, right? No? Okay. Also, Kelly put a map out there, right? I feel like the next meeting in 7 days should not have any zoning at all items, because that map, we don't even know our boundaries. Like, how can we zone something that we don't even know our boundaries? How about we get that in order, and then we can actually try to do a zoning? Because I know a development on Frisco, right, that's building houses, but they don't have to go through the city, because guess what? Because it's not part of the city. But the map that she put out says it's part of the city. So how about we don't put any agenda items about zoning on the meeting until we get our maps figured out? That, I think, would be a smart move. I also think that y'all should get together and let the Piedmont informed city attorney, or Piedmont informed attorney, speak longer than 3 minutes. And I just hope you guys know that this is a huge deal. Rob, thank you for looking at the time, waiting for me to shut up. Appreciate that. Yeah, because you don't care. Because I'm saying I'm gonna have to live and breathe and live and deal with this thing. I built my house, my forever home, on family land. And I want my kids to grow up. It wasn't beautiful. I love this place. I went to high school here. I grew up my whole life here. And I want to be here. But I don't know how long I can live next to that thing. And I don't know if you know, they bought more land. Yeah, it's 15 seconds, Kurt. It's coming. But they bought more land. They're going to build this thing huge, and we can't control it. You think you can control it, but you're not going to be able to. And I hope you take the time and effort on this vote.
Thank you. Amber Ramsey.
Well, gentlemen, I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I was thinking about what he said about the vote versus the voice. And I did clap. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, Mr. Lomack. I was actually happy. It made me so happy that you did that. And the reason why is I personally not handled everything perfectly. You guys have not either. When people don't feel heard, they get louder and louder. When we try to do the things the right way and we don't get a response, it's hard when you're taught your whole life that good is good and right is right, and your elected officials actually represent you and they hear you. All I'm asking is for empathy. There are a lot of people right now who are scared and worried, and they're not getting the response or any empathy. And that's a lot of weight. So I agree we don't do everything right. And sometimes people talk and they're angry, and that's not fair. Shouldn't be directed at any of you. And I have listened to you gentlemen. I can literally hear your voices in my head at night when I sleep. I've watched so many videos, and I could compliment every single one of you on something. Mr. Schlemach, I listened to an argument that you did such a good job standing up for the citizens. And sometimes I think that you come off a certain way when you're actually very intelligent and you care. Mr. Cardwell, actually very empathetic. The mayor, I've always loved. Mr. Myers, he listened to me the other day when I really needed somebody to listen to me. Mr. Heisey, we don't always agree, but he is engaged, and he is engaging with the public, and whether you agree with him or not, we are reaching out to him as a lifeline because of that. Mr. Jones, I know you're uncomfortable speaking to me because you think I'm the community attorney. I promise you it's not against you. People are just scared and nervous and worried. They need empathy and they need leadership. And you are in these positions because you were voted in, but remember the time before now when you weren't. I've seen in the past, looking on Facebook, where Mr. Carwell and Mr. Heisey were advocating for changes, and that's how they became to be on the council. Please just try and remember that what often comes off as anger is really fear. When people are angry or showing anxiety, it's because when they're angry or upset, it's because they're anxious. They don't know what to do. And I know that you didn't take that on. I know you're not getting paid hardly anything. The other expression that's been coming to my head a lot is, heavy is the head that wears the crown. I know you are dealing with a lot, but if you forget right now, I mean, things are reaching a boiling point. If you do not show your constituents some empathy, it will explode, and we need you to do that. That little bit of empathy that Mr. Meyer showed me the other day meant so much to me. We just need to have a voice. You need to remember when you felt like you didn't have a voice and you came in to change things. So please forgive us for doing things wrong sometimes, and we need to extend you guys the same courtesy. So again, I apologize, Mr. Schlemmer, for clapping. It was actually a positive. I was really proud of you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Without objection, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned.